Hey guys, today I want to talk about camera basics, and in 3D we're going to be working in Maya, but we're going to be looking at the basic workings of a camera. Now, one of the things that these 3D cameras try to do is simulate that of a real camera. And so we utilize the basic principles and techniques used in real-life photography and film in computer animation. Things are a little bit different in some ways, and sometimes we've got to do a little homework and understand the relationships between certain things. But overall, I want to go through some of these basic things with you as we look at a camera and create new cameras and what you can do with them. One of the things to make sure is that all cameras operate on the principles of focusing and capturing light exposed on light-sensitive film. Of course, we are not using film anymore. We're using digital sensors and those kind of things. But essentially, light comes in through the hole of the tiny little hole, and it exposes a plate in the back, and then on that, the image is recorded in the computer. That basic idea is the same kind of thing. There's a couple terms that we want to understand. One is the camera specifications, like there's different sizes of the lenses that we will be using, and we'll be choosing that whenever we make our choices. Focal length is the distance between the focal point of the lens and the film plate. So at the back of the film camera here, and the focal point, we've got the focal length. And one of the things that the angle of view is the viewing angle of the scene created from the focal point. So the focal point, as it is closer to the camera or farther from the camera, adjusts to how much we actually get to see inside the image. How much of that view is contained in our actual image. So the farther the focal distance is away, the more narrow of a view we see, and the closer it is, the larger narrow. So if I wanted to do a close-up on someone and focus on their face from a distance, I would adjust my focal length, and I would get just their face or shoulders. If I wanted to do a panoramic, then I'd have a very small focal length, short. So this might be 20, and this might be 100. So that sort of thing. And so changing those things changes the angle of view, this angle of view right here. One thing that we will be working with, and I have a separate demonstration on, is the depth of field. And I have a complete demonstration on that. But one of the things that helps us with our digital cameras is the fact that we can digitally create this sense of depth. By default, everything is infinitely focused, but we don't necessarily want that. We want to be able to choose where the camera is and have it focus a certain amount of at a certain distance. So the focal length from here to here is 2.02 units. And so this distance is going to tell Maya that this camera wants to focus at this point, and then we will adjust how much of these other things in the scene are rendered and in focus. So by default, we can choose a certain specific point which we'll try to be focused on, and then as we refine that, we can keep this in focus and start to bring in some of the other areas in the scene, which gives the sense of more realism. It gives a more real sensation. You can also choose an area of an object in the background, and that area will be focused within a certain range, and as you get farther from that range, it becomes out of focus. So what I want to do is I want to go into Maya here, and I have a scene, and I'm going to create a new camera. Now in my panel here, I'm going to go up to panels, and I'm going to go down to perspective, go to perspective, and there I'm going to choose a new perspective camera. Now I want to move this camera about. Looks like I'm inside a portion of my house, so I'm looking around. And one of the things I want you to see is that if I go and choose select my camera, I'm going to go to the attribute editor. And when I go to the attribute editor for my camera, I can see different things. Now, currently, I have a focal length of 35 millimeters. A focal length of 35 millimeters. If I start to adjust these things, that's going to change the way it appears in the scene. The farther away I am, that's the default is 2.5, and then it has a and then 3500 is the maximum. Well, 35 millimeter is like a 35 millimeter camera. 50 is kind of like the human eye. So if I wanted this to have kind of the perception of the human eye, I would set my focal length to about 50. So as I moved in and through the scene, I could see things quite nicely. Now, if I wanted to, say, create more of a wide panoramic, let's say I'm here in this location. If I wanted to create more of a wide panoramic, I could reduce my values here. I could back this off and say to go to 20 or something, and I get this sense of a much wider look. Okay? And notice that this angle of view is changing because I'm changing the focal length. I'm not changing my angle of view value. It's changing as I change this. So as I have my number here gets higher, the angle of view is getting smaller. Notice that. Let's say I go to 10, the angle of view is 120. So if we were to look back at the notes, back at the top, what's happening is as this distance is changing from the camera here to here to there. So if my distance from the camera is smaller, say this is 10, then I have a much wider angle. If it's 35 or 50, I have a much more narrow angle. And those are things that I can adjust right there in my settings here. So if I wanted a panoramic view, you can see how it kind of distorts things and how the perception of objects like this thing here in front of my scene, how it's being distorted. And if I go back to 35, I'm back here, and things feel a lot more natural at this level. Now, some of the things that you might want to do is you may very well want to have that kind of long, stretched effect, and you could very well stretch that out. And that's essentially like focusing your camera's, focusing the lens of your camera and changing the values. So if I went from 35 to 50, I'm going to increase things just a little bit. Now I have a little bit hard time adjusting that here. But if I made a slider for it, I could actually control those things. Like here's my focal length. I'm going to use my virtual slider here, and I can move and pull things in and out by choosing that. So I can see a little bit different. You can see how this works. And so one of the things that you can do is actually, that's kind of an effect that as you change the focal length of your camera and you actually move it more forward or backwards, you can create some really interesting effects like used in, that is used in. And so here's the effect that you could get by moving the camera back. So this is in JAWS. Right about here. Right there. So as you pull the camera backwards and increase, or as you're moving the camera forwards and you're decreasing the focal length, you get this sense of things stretching. There's other famous clips of that technique being used as well, but that was the one I wanted you to see. And so as I animated my camera going back, I could actually change my focal length to go forward, like so, and get that kind of strange stretching effect. Okay? So a couple other things I want you to see, and I'm going to look at a different point of view here in my scene. I'm going to go to a different camera view. And when I move to a different camera view, I'm going to be able to see the camera from the side, from the top. I want to go to the side here. This is the front. I want to go to the side. Okay, so here's my house. And I want to choose my camera that I just created. So I'm going to bring in my outliner and see if I can find my camera real quick. Let's see, perspective, let's see if I can find it here, perspective 1. So here it is, way over here. And so if I use the move tool, I can use my transform tool to bring up these controls, but a better tool that I like is to have the tool manipulator for the actual camera by hitting the T key. And you notice when I do that, I'm going to have my tools here, and then I have this option here. So I'm going to move back into my scene, and I'm going to just pull my camera up much closer. And so what you can see is I'm going to bring up my perspective 1 camera, which is the one I'm controlling right now. And as I'm going to hide the grid so it's easier to see. I got a lot of things in this scene, but this manipulator makes it so that I can move this camera. And as I move this camera, it's staying focused. I'm going to hide this. It is staying focused on this house. Now I'm going to move it closer yet. So as I move it, it's staying focused on this manipulator. Now the focal length is pretty big, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. And I'm going to pull the camera back a little bit farther. And as I move it, say, right or left, notice how I move it right or left, how it's moving this camera, you can see it in the different previews, it's always staying focused at that point. So this little center of focus here is always the thing that it's looking at. So I can a lot more easily manipulate and move that camera around wherever I like. So if I want to look at something over here or at a specific point, like this little bush over here. I'm going to move it onto that bush, and then I could have my camera. I could move my camera then around. I got to make sure it's actually on there. So sometimes it can be kind of tricky of where things are looking. So, like with anything, you got to learn to manipulate things in 3D. And get things on the point. And then as I move that camera, it's staying focused on that object. I'm going to go in over here, and then I'm going to go down. And my focal length is 50. I'm going to look at this from a different point of view so I can kind of get a better sense of what I'm seeing here. There we go. And my camera is up high, awful high, so I'm going to bring it down to eye level or so. And I can move it in. So what's nice is, as I move in, it's staying focused on the one wherever I have that camera point on. If it's this bush, if it's the hose here, down here on the ground, I can keep it there, located on a spot, and then I can explore different camera views as I move my camera around. And these things are nice when you're trying to figure out what kind of shot you're going to create and where and how you want to focus your camera. So I can focus my camera nicely on there, back it off a little bit, and I can see what's actually going to render by using my camera tools here under camera settings, and I can bring up my film gate or my resolution gate here, and then I can go to film or camera settings and go to vertical. So this is what my camera is actually going to render when I